This is Tony Mark
This is Russell Grether.
of the Mark and Grether Group, and welcome to the Malibu Podcast.
Howdy, partner. It's Dane. The name of the company here, you guys got Iron Sand. It's Iron Sand.
I'm Tony Mark with Russell Grether, and we're here with Dane Skophammer and Iron Sand. We thought we'd try a new segment of the podcast, which is interviewing and highlighting local businesses that we think are amazing. And we came over here to actually just look at knives for ourselves one day or to give out as client gifts. And we were so excited about it. We asked Dane if we could interview him for the podcast. So welcome to the Malibu Podcast.
Thanks. Good to be here.
We don't video a lot because a lot of times the visuals are not terribly exciting for what we do, but your place is so amazing. We wanted to capture as much of you and your work environment as we could. So typically we start out the podcast just letting our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about you. So if you would, introduce yourself and your place.
Yeah. I'm Dane Skophammer, Iron Sand Malibu Knives, and Iron Sand Malibu, and we make knives. And I've been a Malibu local here for 40 years, and grew up on this street on Zumarez, down the road a little ways. And we make custom kitchen knives and hunting knives and dive knives and kind of anything that you can think of is something that we can do around here. Maybe I should do a little bit more introduction. Sorry. I went to Malibu High School. I played football there. I played football at UCLA. Yeah, I played football at UCLA, and then I was a chef for about 10 years. And then got into making knives after that.
I'm actually curious. How did you get this workshop? How did you tell us about that? Because this is such a unique place.
Well, we built it. We rent this land. I've been here for 15 years from Bill and Sandy Mitchell, who live right over there, and they've been so cool about kind of do whatever as long as it's legal, I guess. And so my dad and I poured this slab, and a contractor and I built this roof, and then we pieced together all the equipment and brought it in. So we built it from scratch. It was just a dirt yard.
Wow, that's awesome.
Pretty fun.
Yeah. So we looked on your website that's there now, and it has a community, family, and home as your core tenets of your company. How did you come up with those? And
I think community has always been super important to me. As a person and as a business, it's definitely been the thing that's kept us going and keeps us going now, right? Like we've got pretty deep ties here. I've always done my best to stay in touch with the community, and we show up to the food events, and I work the snack shack and show our love to the community that way, and they've been good enough to help support us while we're getting this business started and getting it off the ground. So that's the community aspect. Family aspect, it's a lot to start a business, and it is it definitely it can be tough on your family members, and more than, I guess, the reason why it's in the headline, right, is because that's what our knives are all about, right? Like the food preparation and food sharing is a communal event, and it's a family event, and these are supposed to be products that help highlight that as special each time, and traditionally something that can be passed down and something that can be cherished for generations. And the home is a part of that also, right? So that's why why those lines are in there, more about how these theoretically how these knives help bring together those three things well, and that's what we live our life like and how we want our products to be viewed, I guess.
Well, you can definitely say your family's integrated very deeply in the community because of your business and, of course, your wife's dance studio and how that's just gotten so popular. My 5-year-old is a big fan.
Yeah.
So you guys are
I'm
very
super proud
ingrained.
of her. Yeah, I'm super proud of her. She was here in Malibu for a long time. She's been here for almost 10 years. And she didn't find her people here in Malibu, right? She was a little bit, like, okay, I'm here, as Dane's wife. And it wasn't until she kind of started the dance studio and started, kind of creating her own community in there that I think has been really special and really cool. She loves it. She loves the people that are coming there. She's really excited about the future of Malibu Dance Academy, and it's been just hugely successful from the point of view of bringing together lots of families into an art form, and she's totally pumped. She's doing a great job. She rebuilt the old Zuma Sushi restaurant into a dance studio, and it's really pretty. It's cute, and it's finally a good use of that space. I growing up remember going to those two restaurants that were there, and it was where you saw everybody from this side of Malibu. It was definitely a good place to be, and there was music and there was community, and now that's back, so I think that's really cool, and it gives this side of Malibu something that they've never really had, which was a real deal dance studio.
I don't remember if we got this on video, but when we were talking about the knives, just as I'm listening to you talk about Malibu, the fact that you've taken pieces of metal that came out of the Woolsey fire and are turning those back into useful, beautiful knives, I think is kind of amazing. How did you? Was that something that somebody suggested to you, or was that your own concept?
I've always been that guy. I've got an affinity for like things that people don't want anymore, and I like to take them and use them, either if they're machines, rebuild them and reuse them, or always looking at scrap as something that could be useful. And when the Woolsey fire came, Frank Kurtzy, whose truck this was he's like, I've had that truck for almost 50 years, and it's like, I loved that thing. And I felt bad. And so I asked him, like, hey, can I take some of it and do something with it? He's like, absolutely. So, and he's like, we pull off he had me pull off some of the parts that were important to him. And then I went through and tore it apart and, got the parts that would be useful in knife making. And we've been using it. We've made, a dozen knives or so with it. And it's something that I want to do like a whole collection sometime and say, hey, this is our Woolsey series of knives and do something like that. I haven't gotten to that yet, but we will, But yeah, it's always been something that's in me, finding something that people don't think is valuable anymore and turning it into something important.
In talking to you before, it sounds like, you've been in Malibu a long time. We were talking a bit just about the things we've seen change, but obviously we're both still here. So just wanted to ask you kind of what keeps you in Malibu, what still draws you here, even as we see our community kind of evolve and change.
I think for me, the things that I've always loved about Malibu are still here. A lot of the people even are still here. But for the most part, right, it was always the outdoors and the surf, the fishing, and, like baseball at the Bluffs and, being at the beach. I don't, I'm not one of those guys that needs to have no change ever in my life to still see the things that were good that are still here. I think that I think that Malibu is still a great place to be and a great place to live, and it's an amazing place to raise a family. The community here is super strong, even if, it's changed some.
I agree. I wound up buying my wife one of your knives last time we came over here, and she's from New Zealand, so she's not one to hand out compliments, lightly. And she said, hands down, it's the best knife she's ever used. Absolutely loves it. It seems as though you hold yourself to a pretty high standard here. You mentioned you'd thrown away hundreds of knives that didn't work out for one reason or another. So, what kind of is your standard of perfection when it comes to the product you put out?
It's extremely high. I think I've been pretty blessed in the kitchen. When I worked with a man named Chris Morningstar, who's an amazing chef. He had really high standards for his dishes. If it wasn't perfect, it wasn't going out. I think for certain things, I've always been, I'm definitely not a perfectionist, but I'm detail oriented on the details that matter to the things that matter. And these knives, I think, are an example of that. Sometimes some of the details aren't as immaculate as on other knives, but the things that do matter on the knives are as perfect as I can make them. And that's every knife. None of them will leave unless they're as perfect as I can make them.
And how many knives are handmade these days? I mean, most, I would imagine, are.
I think that there's first of all, handmade, I feel like is a pretty, it's a broad term. We got all these machines in here, right? So I consider them handmade as long as they're not stamped out by some giant press in Germany, right? Like they're pretty much handmade to me. I think that there's more than people would expect. That there's a pretty, it was like kind of at like that point where there were, before microbreweries, like you started seeing them being everywhere. There was still quite a few of them around the country, and now they're everywhere, right? But for a while there was like a growing sort of resurgence of brewing in this company, and it's kind of similar to that. I think you've got probably 100 custom knife makers in America. Maybe there's 50 really top end. And that's, and then maybe there's some that are really, really impressive. And then there's one guy who is like the godfather of the custom kitchen knife industry. And he, a lot of people are familiar with his work. He is, he's got a line through Wusthof now. He's like one of the only small custom knife makers to sell out, and he is. But I feel like in a great way, because it allowed him. Now he's producing lots of knives and selling lots of knives, but it's freed him up to do all kinds of other, like artistic stuff. So he still does his own stuff also, and that is really cool. And the fact that I can't remember his name right now is not good, but that's me. 5 minutes from now, I'll get it.
Yeah.
So, seeing as though you pretty much make everything custom ordered, do you have kind of a basic template you like to work from, or where you're aiming towards kitchen knives, or are you just as happy to make people knives for anything they want to use them for?
We don't do exclusively custom orders. We basically have settled into like 7 or 8 kitchen knife styles that we do regularly, and that we try and keep inventory on, but doesn't stick around long. And then we'll do pretty much any custom work that anybody wants us to do. I try to stick more to the kitchen knife stuff, but no, I just got asked to make a sword the other day. I'm going to make a sword, so it's going to be dope.
Tell my son no.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm pretty pumped. I've always wanted to make a sword, so I never really had the, the ability, not the ability, I've always been able to do it, but I never had the time to sit down and do it, and now somebody's going to pay me to do it. I'm going to do it. It's going to be awesome.
That's really cool. What sort of things for the layman, like, I want to go out and buy a new knife set. What sort of factors would you consider for somebody that's maybe not?
I think you want to consider, who's making them, obviously, where they're making them. I think, a lot of knife sets that you're going to buy are being made in a factory somewhere by somebody, which is fine if that's what you're looking for. I think that, you want to make sure that you're avoiding the stuff that's made by, factories in China, right? Like things like that. The same sort of things that you would avoid, not just for quality, but you don't, work conditions, stuff like that. This environment can be punishing and would be punishing for people without proper PPE or work standards, right? Children that might be making knives somewhere, which it happens. You see it in India, and it's not safe and it's not good. So you would want to avoid those knives for sure. But then after that, you want to look at like knife shape, right? Does this thing look like the sort of knife that's going to be something that I've used before, or something that I would like to use? Does it look interesting? Does it look fun? And then, the layman probably isn't going to understand like steel choice, right? Like the steel choice is critical when you're making knives, but for the most part, they could tell you that they're made out of anything, and you probably wouldn't know the difference right away while you're buying them. So some of the the more you want to buy knives from reputable knife makers that are building lots of high quality knives if you're going to be buying them, and then you want when it comes to knife shape, one of the things that you really want to look for is how thin are they behind the edge, right? So regardless of what steel is in there, the second most important factor in cutting ability is the amount of thickness, a 1/4 inch behind the edge. And if it's too thick, then it's not going to work well for as long, would be my impression. And then
The knives that I've felt so far, I mean, the only analogy that I can think of is when I grab a surfboard, I can kind of just tell, because I've been surfing for so long, if it is going to feel good. And I can just put it under my arm and kind of tell. And I feel like with your knives, they just like fit. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, we put a lot of attention onto the handles and onto picking proper steel for the knives. So I think it is a little bit like grabbing a surfboard. If you hold on to it and you get a feeling from it, that's a good knife. You don't need to go too much further. As long as you're buying it from somebody that you believe is making good knives, then the feel or the feeling that you get from it is going to be a lot. It's like you wouldn't buy a board. Well, you might buy a board from just anybody, but most people wouldn't, right? They would go to a shaper, or they would go to a company that they know, and then they would say, okay, let me see some boards, and let me pull one out, and let me put it under my arm, and this feels about right. This feels, good thickness, or whatever it is that you're looking for, and that would be what you would go with, right? You wouldn't just go to a random bazaar of boards and pick one, and of course, yeah, I mean, maybe you would, but I wouldn't.
Well, I love that your experience actually working into the kitchen kind of helped shape what you do with knives, because as a chef you actually know what knives should be and what you really need out of them, and it's probably what makes your knives so good, is that experience.
I hope that the experience that I got in those kitchens wasn't, I know it wasn't all wasted, but I know that it's in these knives too. I think that that's a big part of what we are. That's something that we hope translates to the customer, in that they feel it and that they know that it was made by somebody who knows. I spent a lot of time in kitchens. I spent hundreds of hours chopping things and analyzing and buying expensive knives and sharpening every day. And before I started doing this full time, I was handling knives every day, all day, for hours, or all day. And I've got, even before that, part of the reason why I got into cooking was I like knives so much, right? Like I've loved knives since I was a child, and I've always had them, and I always loved to collect them. And now I can basically make whatever I want, which is fun.
Tell us about the types. You were telling us earlier that there's kind of like three different. There's the cleavers and the little doom, and I was looking on your website. What would you say are the main specialties that you guys make?
You know, your standard knife block comes with like 7 or 8 knives. Come with a boning knife, paring knife, chef's knife, medium-sized chef's knife, and then hopefully some sort of a slicer. And we stick to those, basic shapes. I don't say that any one is. I mean, a large chef's knife is indispensable, and a paring knife is really important. And then basically after that, you can fill in your block based on your needs, and we try and provide enough variety so that if people think that they need something that is suits their style a little bit more, then we've got that. You can get by pretty easy in a kitchen with 3 shapes. You can get by with our paring knife, which is our larkspur, or the medium size chef's knife, which is the Zoomerez, and the large chef's knife, which is Big Do, would be a good combo set. But for the most part, we encourage people to buy them all, right? Because they're all good. They all have their own uses. We don't do these. We don't do different shapes just to sell more knives. We do different shapes because different knives do different things, just like any tool. You want those different shapes for different stuff, and depending on your level of sort of expertise, you want to be able to use them for the proper job. Chef's knife get almost everything done, but it's not the right tool to fillet a fish. It's not the right tool to bone a chicken. It's not necessarily the best tool to mince garlic with, right? Sometimes smaller is better. Sometimes bigger is better. Sometimes, the one tool that's like totally indispensable is a cleaver, a large cleaver. But most people aren't hacking through bones, so it's unimportant to most people. But you can't hack through a bone with a normal kitchen knife, or you shouldn't. So when everybody asks me what's the one indispensable kitchen knife, that's usually the one. It's the one that you can't be without. It's the one I always bring with me in my chef roll when there's a possibility that you might have to hack through some bones, because you don't want to do it with your super fine edges. It's just not smart. Your knives won't last as long.
I don't want to forget to ask you, how do people find you, your knives, your website? Can we get all that information so people can look you up, find you, get
so
knives?
you can call me, 310-266-8273. You can DM me on Instagram, Iron_Sand_Malibu. We've got a bunch of great pictures on there, and it's fun to sort of follow us on Instagram. And then we have our website, which is ironsandmalibu.com.
Perfect. Do you have any more questions?
No, that was awesome.
I know, this was amazing.
I got one more thing.
Let's do it.
There is a land use survey going on in Malibu right now. What to do with the vacant parcels of land that Malibu owns. And I'm on the Parks and Rec Commission, and it's important to us to get the feedback from the community on what they think should be done. So I would like to encourage everybody to get out there and attend these survey meetings and fill out the online survey that's out there. Do your best to be part of this community discussion that's happening.
What's your opinion on what should be done with because there's the parcel across from on Point Doom, right? Mm-hmm. There's the parcel that has all the equipment at the corner. It's the huge parcel at Trancas. Mm-hmm. And then
there's the La Paz
right.
spot,
Yeah,
which is the chili cook-off site.
Right.
And then there's one kind of tucked back behind there. And I think that the experiences with my wife trying to find a place to hold her the recital at the end of the year, right? So we ended up at Pepperdine, which is a really great spot, but it's super expensive and it's difficult. You have to book it like a year in advance. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a lot of people advocating for a performing arts, visual arts, like a center for that. Spoken with Fireball about it a bunch of times. He's the guy kind of driving that from the Arts Commission in Malibu. And I think that would be really rad. I think there's a lot you can do with that. You could, build a small, Malibu history museum kind of in there and make it a really cool place to kind of hang out. So I think that would be cool, but I'd rather see that one down there in the center of Malibu. And I'd like to see here, you guys might not have heard about it, but we had a huge problem with the swim teams here in Malibu. They fractured, and one of the teams wasn't getting, enough pool time. The pool time's, limited anyway by the high school and by the,
And the lights too, right?
And the lights, and there's a lot limiting the amount of time that people can get at the pool. So I think in the future, and because almost every city has one, a public pool, we need, a pool, community center, or like, some place to play basketball inside, something like that, and some field space. There's been talk of putting like a library with that, which I think would be kind of cool. So I think that the next thing that we're gonna be short on is soccer field space. There's two groups now that not just AYSO that do soccer here, and we don't want to see kids that are sidelined because there isn't enough space for them to play, and so that we don't have to pick sides, which is basically what we'll have to do with the pool thing. Making sure that there's enough space for all the kids to play is important. And so a couple of soccer fields, a pool, and an auditorium, a gym sort of thing here is what I've advocated for 2.5 years now on the commission. I think that we've needed to build it for a long time, and I think that hopefully this survey bears out that people want a pool, and I think that it would be a great place to put there.
I'll definitely sign up for all those things. I've got kids that are just starting swimming, playing the Views club soccer team. We wound up having to host the soccer team over at our property on Bush for a while because for months they couldn't get field time. Finally got that worked out, and that's a great program. I remember growing up here as a kid, we used to break into the junior high gym just so we could play volleyball on the weekends. And one time the police showed up, and they thought we were vandalizing the school, and they came up, squad cars all around, guns drawn, and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" Like, "We just want to play volleyball."
Yeah.
You can't break into the gym to play volleyball. I was like, "If you really wanted to play, and they let us go." But we've needed more facilities here for a long time, and I think there's a lot more kids here now than there probably were when we were growing up. So
it's definitely close, I think. But either way, we needed those facilities when we were kids.
Yeah.
And and I think part of what I'd like to see, is soccer here and baseball, softball down here, right? So we're also running into problems with the girls softball program. There's no regulation softball field at the Bluffs, right? So even though we've played softball there for years, we can't legally host games in the league that we're in now. So the girls have to go to the high school, which breaks apart that community thing that we're always trying to be a part of and always trying to build here. The Bluffs should be the place where a whole family can come and stay for 4 or 5 hours, watch a couple of games, coach a game, and not have to have the family split in two different directions because they've got two different genders of kids. So I'd like to see the soccer field of the Bluffs turned into a girls softball field, and all the soccer come down here so that we can accommodate one season there and one season here.
What's your view on the skate park over at the Bluffs?
I think it's going to be awesome when it's built. I think that
get through all the controversy.
I think at least the way it looks to me, that the controversy is basically over, and barring any lawsuits that come from the people that that own the land behind it, I think it's going to be okay, and I think it's going to go through. I'm motivated. I think that we might see shovels in the ground sooner than a year from now, which is good. And I think that they've said like maybe 6 months.
Wow, that's great.
Which would be great, but it's also super slow, right? Like this is
It's like
10,
10
15,
years,
10 or
right?
15 years in the making, and 6 years after the plans are developed, and just forever. So the skate park is at the top of our list on the Parks and Rec Commission. We're not going to forget about it. We think it's super important to try and follow through on these decisions that were made before we got there, and trying to do the best that we can. But dealing with the coastal commission plus the city is complicated, and it's difficult, and it's definitely not my favorite thing to do in the world, but it's important, so we'll do it.
It's definitely a testament to your belief in the community. It's really awesome. I didn't realize you were on the commission.
Yeah.
I was going to put in my vote too for the equestrian center. The Malibu you and I grew up in was very Wild West, with people riding a lot of horses around here, and we talked about our kids riding, and I'd love to. My daughter's going all the way out to Thousand Oaks a couple times a week to be able to ride. Be great just to see more of that come back to our community for our kids.
Yeah, well, we gotta do what we can to sort of try and keep it around, and foster any sort of anything that we can in terms of interest. I would think and I would hope that there would be plenty of that here, but it does seem to have tapered off quite a bit from when I was a kid, and I don't know. It feels like it shouldn't, but
the facility that's here is amazing.
It's really amazing.
We just got to get it. Just down by the school, there's an amazing equestrian center.
Right, yeah. On, what was that?
That's right off of,
Merritt?
yeah, right behind the school.
So I'll do anything I can from our side to try and build some interest in being there. But it is something that's come up in our meetings as to what we're doing with this, park that nobody uses. So, if we want to keep the equestrian park as an equestrian park, it's got to start seeing some use, I think, and that's a challenge for us and the riders and ropers, and whoever wants to be involved is gonna have to step up and actually use it.
I'll put my wife on notice. She's literally trying to get credentialed right now so she could bring Pony Club to Malibu. So
Good.
Hopefully that happens in time.
I can't wait.
All right, so Dane, if you would take us for a tour of the shop.
Yeah, so this is our forge, anvil, hammers. We do most of our shaping of material here. We buy steel sometimes. Sometimes we collect steel. Like this bar here is a bar from a leaf spring of a truck that burned down in Woolsey down at the bottom of Zoomerez. So I'll work this into a shape like this, and then we'll use the hammer and anvil to beat in the bevels and put in the heels, and then we use the power hammer basically here to flatten the material back out, make sure it's all straight and good. And then what happens is we do a tempering or an annealing cycle in our heat treat oven, which is hot right now. Got a huge piece of Gary Wanacott had a jackhammer bit for his backhoe in there, so I'm annealing that one right now, and then I'll cut it into pieces and use it for knives too. And then I'll take them back over to the anvil and we'll flatten them out, and then they come back into here where I heat them up to 1983 degrees, the year I was born, and then they go into these quench plates. So these are aluminum quench plates, and they get cooled down rapidly in here with some forced air, CO2, or not CO2, just compressed air. And then they go into a liquid nitrogen bath after they're cooled down. So we got our liquid nitrogen. They let us play with this. I don't have any right now, but...
And is steel the metal that you work with for everything, or are there different
It's all
metals?
steel. We primarily work with AEBL stainless steel, which is an alloy of hardenable knife steel, and it's stainless, and it's a really good knife steel. It's the one that they use in like razor blades and stuff like that. I think I'm one of the few people in America, maybe the world, that actually forges AEBL. Most people will use it. They'll cut knife shapes and then grind it. It's a really good knife steel, but it's really hard to forge. So ours are unique in that way. And then we bring them over here and we grind them. So these are our grinders. When they start, they look kind of like they look like this, right? So they got, our emblem on there. And then, let me see. These are steak knives, right? So they look more like this. And then we grind them on the grinder. We stand here like this, and basically, by hand, get the right angle and work them down. And then we do that through several grits of sandpaper. It starts on a coarse grit like this. This is 24 grit belt. Work all the way through to like 220, and then a Scotch-Brite thing, and then it's all handles, right? So we've got some local wood here. This is teak. This is not very local at all. But we just did some eucalyptus, right? So this is a huge piece of eucalyptus. Feel how heavy that is for its size.
I didn't realize this was strong enough.
Yeah. It's
I
strong
didn't
and
realize
it's
it was strong.
dense, and it's pretty good handle material. We'll see. This is the first ones that I've done with that. But I've done some avocado and some other stuff from around here that's really cool. And then we'll rip it and we'll put it on the handles. This is a big cleaver. This is that eucalyptus that we're doing here. And then they get pins, and then it's all handle shaping from there, which I go back to these grinders for. And then
And what is this? Is this actually a bone?
yeah, that's bone.
What kind of bone?
It's camel bone.
Wow.
And then it's multiple hours of hand sanding after we get off these grinders, and then it's sharpening, and that's it.
How do you put the handles on? Do you glue them or just like bolts?
So right now they're super glued on. Right, this is a technique that's taken me years to like get, because I used to have to like clamp them into place or like do whatever I could to get this way. We figure out that these two pieces will match well together. We glue it, drill it, glue this piece, drill it, glue this piece, drill it, this piece, drill it, and then pull them all off, and then epoxy and pin. So they'll get pins like these ones here, all the way through the handle. We actually will ream out these little holes too, so that we will, when we set the pins, we'll actually pound the pins so that they're domed over, so that the ends are bigger than the middle, so that they can't work their way out, even if the glue would fail, which it never will because it's the strongest glue in the freaking world. Epoxy is like basically it becomes part of the wood almost immediately, and it binds equally well to the metal. It's really, really tough glue. Those are dive knives that we work on.
Wow.
This is for like fish fillets and stuff?
Those are for like killing fish.
Cool.
What kind of a handle will this get?
It'll get, we do two styles on those. We'll do like a black canvas micarta and brass, and we do a teak and brass. Black canvas is like indestructible. The teak a little less, but they've been using teak on boats for years. I figure it'll hold up for dive knives pretty well. We got a few of them out in public now. A couple of them custom for like just people wanted daggers in their house. We did bone on those ones, but we can do anything that anybody wants. But
Would this be kind of a tactical knife as well, then?
yeah, for sure. We've got my cousin, I think I told you, is a firearms instructor. So he's got the outlet to sell some of that stuff, and he does pretty good.
He's selling tactical knives.
Yeah, selling a few of ours.
And at what point do you put engraving logo?
That's while it's being hot worked. So in the initial forging phase, I'll say, okay, this is done enough, or this is basically done without the grinding, and that's when all the hot work stops. I'll put the punch, put the brand on it, and then.
How did you come up with the logo? It's pretty cool.
I had always known that I'd wanted a wave and a knife, and I asked my wife to help me figure it out.
Where's the logo?
She kind of hard to see on that one, but
Oh, I see.
you can see it here. She
I think it's awesome.
sent it to a graphic designer, and they worked it out. I got a bunch of options. I like it. You know, it's like a little tribal. It's pretty simple. It works good on the stamp.
So you actually stamped that into the hot
Yeah,
metal?
here I'll show you. I got a like this. This one, not one that I'm using right now, so it's a little rusty, but that's what it looks like.
Oh, cool.
And you hit this side with a hammer,
Wow.
and you hold this side with your hand. This one, you know, they get kind of beat up on the corners and stuff, so this one's too short. It's like holding it
like
and
mushroom.
like, God, it's hot, you know, and then you wiggle, and then the stamp is no good, so you messed up a whole knife, and that's no fun.
Yeah.
So you get
So-
a new one done.
What you were heating up from the metal you got from Gary, what is that process?
So it's, you know, it's basically like that steel right there is basically the steel that they use for like a hammer. When you get a hammer, it's hardened.
So that hardens the steel?
So this is hopefully relaxing that hardness, where we're taking it up above the critical temperature to relax the bonds in the steel. Hopefully that works, because otherwise it's going to be really tough to cut.
So you take that and then you cut it into
I'll
knives.
cut that one into rounds, and then I will take those rounds and forge them into rectangles, and then I will forge weld three pieces of steel together. So we'll have that steel on the outside of a piece of really good hard knife steel in the center.
Where does all this equipment come from? This looks like very specialty equipment.
That piece right there came from like Northern California, some guy's barn forever ago. That's
How old is it?
It's a 100-year-old tool. And then most of it's pretty well. This piece here is a kiln. The same company makes ceramic kilns, but they make some just for knife makers, and they're just long instead of wide and deep. They're just long and deep, not very wide, because knives aren't that wide. So, and then, you know, other stuff that I picked up. These grinders pick up at garage sales. This is an old drill press. It's a Mohawk drill press. That thing came from the 40s also. This is a micro mill here. This is a cool bit of kit. This thing comes down, and then you use these levers here to slide for like slots, which has been good for us. So imagine a piece of metal chucked up in here, and then this thing moves this way, and then that little spindle right there cuts as it goes. And then these things here, these grinders, are not specific to knife makers, but knife makers have adopted these as, you know, like the sort of industry standard for grinding metal blades. Neither of them specific to knife makers. You know, they're aerospace, metalworking, you know, stuff like that. But most of this one is almost specifically designed for knife makers. They've got tool rests. They've got these rotating platens. They've got, you know, all different things that knife makers want to make their knives look finished at the end.
And is this all equipment you've pieced together over many, many years, or did you
Yeah.
know you needed these many tools to get started?
No, I didn't. We started with a forge, an anvil, and this piece, and have added everything after. Slowly. The power hammer came shortly after that, because I realized like almost right away that I'm gonna tear apart my shoulders and never be able to use my arms if I'm hammering everything. So the power hammer is a pretty big thing.
How much force does it bring down?
Exactly how much force, you know,
Or-
I've never done the calculation, but it's plenty. It's less than I can do with my own arm, but it's a lot more accurate, and you can do it all day, and it doesn't bust your arm. So, you know, you can do the calculation. It's 50 pounds that head is, right, and it goes up about almost 12 inches. I don't know, 9 inches, and drops it, right? So
I mean, that thing looks like it weighs a ton.
it weighs 2 tons.
It does? It's
Yeah,
solid?
2,000 pounds.
Wow, that's awesome. And how did you get into all this? Was this a hobby that grew into a career?
Yeah. I was a chef for a long time at, all bunch of different restaurants, bunch in here in Malibu, but mostly in the city. And while I was doing that, I had an uncle who was a custom iron worker, and he had Paso Robles Iron Works up in Paso Robles, and he would let me come into the shop and fart around. And he had a forge, a bunch of power hammers, and I would get in there and make knives. And then after our first baby was born, and I'm busy traveling and not being at home as much as I would have wanted, I realized that I wanted to get out of cooking and do something different. And I always loved this. From the first time I put steel in a forge, watch it get hot, it's like I was hooked. And this isn't the only thing I could have done or wanted to do, but this is definitely the most fun thing that I could think of to do. And so we went after it and just started doing it and kept doing it. Had a little bit of money saved and used that for time in the forge, and just kept going until we got products that were good enough to sell, and then started selling them, and that's how it started.
That's great. I noticed you have some engineering books up there, so you become a knife engineer also.
Yeah, well, you have to understand at least a little bit. I feel like I'm a pretty surface level guy. There's people that understand it an awful lot better than I do, and I'd like to learn more. But those, you've got to understand what's happening in the steel to be able to work it correctly. And the heat treating and the cooling and the liquid nitrogen, all that stuff's got to be done, and it's got to be done right if you're going to end up with products that last a long time or at all.
How many knives did you do incorrectly before? I mean, it's got to take so much practice.
Oh, easily 100. Yeah, easily. And even after we still end up breaking knives or throwing knives away because they're not good enough. And
how can you tell when they're not good enough?
Well, they go through a pretty rigorous process just here. Like if you're, like when you're grinding on knives, or if you're, we don't end up with a lot of like cracks or breaks anymore, right? But you can see it when you get into the process. You can tell that something's not right, or on top of that, you're putting really good, force on these knives sometimes, and if they don't hold up, to even just being put into knife shape, then they're not going to work out. That's, if they make it through this process, we basically, we test them for sharpness and, make sure the edges are where they're supposed to be. But after that, I'm confident that they're going to go out and they're going to be just fine. I don't.
Can you go over the parts of a knife? You named 2 parts in the beginning, and
Yeah. So the biggest difference between our knives, other than size and shape, are some knives are what they call full tang, right? So this is a full tang knife where the knife blade, one piece of steel all the way back through the end of the handle, right? This is a hidden tang knife where you can't see any of that, right? For a long time, these are more popular now because Wüsthof and Henkel and a lot of the bigger German companies sold this as a more durable, better knife. And if I were making cleavers a lot, right? All the cleavers that I make will have full tang handles mostly, even though I don't know that it's the most important thing. These ones are totally good, or just as capable, but they're half as light or half as heavy. And so I feel like a lot of people really like the hidden tang ones, and it's
So the hidden tangs, they shave the tang down so that they can wrap something around it.
So inside of this knife here is the tang, which looks like this, right? So it's a piece of steel that comes off the back, and then we pin it into the knife like this. There's a hole drilled inside of this. There's a hole drilled inside of this block of wood, right? That looks like this. Slide that tang down inside there like that. Put your copper, fit your copper to that spot, and then that's what it is, right? So then the other parts on a knife are you've got two major tapers in a knife. You've got the taper or the bevel, or the main taper, I've heard it called, and then you've got your distal taper. So from here down and from here down, so those are your two tapers, distal taper and bevel. And then you've got, this isn't a true bolster. A true bolster would probably be up a little bit higher, but this is what we call the bolster. This is the choil. Call this the butt, call this the tip. And obviously this is the handle. And sometimes this is called the belly. Call it the belly.
And most, you were saying when we were here last that you sharpen all the knives to be like 15 degrees, or are there different angles for different knives?
Different angles for different knives for sure. These are a lot closer to probably 10 degrees than they are to, I don't measure it, but we're looking for super thin behind the edge, as thin as we can get it back here, and gradually tapering up towards the top, and we get it done. I mean, you can see how thin it is right there behind the edge, which is like, that's going to be something that's hard to pick up on video, but that's what you're looking for in a really good knife is, a normal knife, most everyday kitchen knives will be quite a bit thicker back here behind the edge, right? So when they're not razor sharp on the cutting edge, it's really hard to get through food, right? Imagine something like this trying to go through versus something like this trying to go through. And that's one of the things that's in that knife engineering book that's, helped me learn that. I mean, it isn't something that isn't intuitive, but it isn't something that you see on a lot of knives. So, even like your fancy Japanese knives will be quite a bit thicker here behind the edge, and they'll rely on that razor sharp cutting edge to get it done. And so, the consequence for us is that these knives will cut a lot better a long time after they should have been sharpened. So the only reason why we can do that is because of the steel that we use, right? So it's super tough, resilient steel, and an extra hard knife wouldn't be able to do that. It would chip and break. So these ones don't chip and break. They hold that.
Do you have to worry about balance at all? Like, do different knives have different center of mass? Like,
I think I'm supposed to. I'll be honest. And people are like, "Ooh, it's got great balance." And I'm like, "Fantastic." For the most part, you can hold our knives right here at the bolster, and I think that's where you're supposed to. You don't want too much weight at the back because then we shape the knife the way we want. We grind it so it's got those thin edges, and we put this bolster on, and that's what we get. I wouldn't know how to properly balance. I mean, when it comes to swords and stuff, things that you're going to be swinging, you really, or like a cleaver, you want the weight in a particular spot for sure. For the most part, nobody's swinging these things, right? Like it's little motions like this. I'm not convinced that having exquisite balance is really all that important. We do though weight these handles. So one of my initial feeling when we were doing these, and I got some feedback from my grandfather, and he's like, "Hey, this knife feels too light in the handle." And all the knives are too light for him. I ended up having to weight his extra. But I fill this cavity in here. I fill this hole with copper, just copper dust and epoxy. And then put the knife in, and it adds a little extra weight.
I think the first thing I notice when I grab one of your knives, it just feels good. It's like, it just feels like that's where it belongs, is in your hand.
We spend a lot of time.
And I don't even really cook that much, so that's saying something.
Definitely the the handle shaping and the that comes into it a lot, right? Like I want this thing to look and feel smooth in your hand. It should feel pretty elegant for how kind of rustic they are, which I think is kind of rad. But yeah, I mean, we do. We spend a lot of time shaping that handle so it fits right, so you can hold it here or you can hold it here. In both ways, it feels good.
What do you finish the handles with to keep them resilient?
We put a butcher block oil on the handles, let them soak in there, and then just finish them off. Or
So
there's no anything else. We use stuff that you're supposed to be able to eat, essentially, right? I don't know exactly what's in this, and I don't see a lot of people eating off the knives, but it's safe for butcher blocks, so it's good enough for these knife handles, and it works really well. I've never had one crack or bust for lack of oil. So, and then they're polished. Oh, we put a little. I have a Carmenelia. I don't know if I'm saying that right. This is a Japanese word for it. I use a little Japanese oil on the blade and on the copper and on the handle. And we have a little wax that we put on them. So a little beeswax.
When you get knives back for sharpening, do you redo the coating on the handles too, or is it kind of good for life?
Sometimes, we've had some out there now for 5 years. So some of those are coming back, and I look at them. I don't like advertise that we do that too, but basically, if you bring one back that needs to have that done, I do that too.
This is all very impressive. Did you intern kind of for a period of time with your uncle before you went out on your own, or was it more just something that happened organically for you?
No, he doesn't make knives. He never made knives. So I just used his tools, and it was just something I did for fun, dozen times or so. I spent a couple of days with a knife maker in Morro Bay, a guy named Don Andrade, who's a world famous knife maker. He's a master smith, and he's a really, really great guy. And he walked me through his process. Which is really cool, and Don makes amazing knives, but it's not my style. So, not that it wasn't beneficial. It was definitely good to learn. But these ones are more my style, more what I've wanted to do, and his stuff's more his stuff.
How many hours would you say it takes, you to take a piece of metal and turn it into a knife?
It depends. It depends on the style of knife. The kitchen knives are harder. I can take a leaf spring that's that I've cut, and I can turn it into a knife in. Well, it depends again on the leaf spring, how thick it was, how much I had to work it into the right thickness. Or you can see that one lying there on the ground, or the one that I had in my hand before. And that's, it's still going to take quite a bit of time to get that piece to a thin enough to start forging out a knife. But, all things, hours, an hour.
Do you take do you do them in stages? Like, will you take a piece of metal and create
Yeah,
a lot,
For
blanks
sure,
and
for
then
sure.
do the next process? So kind of move them through. And
We do exactly that. Right now, we're in the finishing stage on about almost 100 pieces that have gone through every step, and they're now here. And so forging out one of our kitchen knives takes about 5 hours, and the rest of the process at least that long again, and probably more like double that. So around 15 hours probably for a knife from us, and that's after so many hundreds of hours working to try and clip that down and getting good at the processes, and we're there now, right? I don't think it's going to get a lot faster, and the product is getting marginally better as we go, but the huge adjustments are over. The big time savers I think are over, which is which is fine. We're comfortable with where we're at right now.
It seems like you're growing very fast. All of a sudden, I feel like everybody's talking about your knives.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's where I mean, it may seem fast to me. It seems like, good Lord, like we've put so much time and effort. I mean, forever in here. It feels like, but it is starting to pop, and we're just about to launch the website. So I think that Malibu or Iron Sand is definitely on the way up, and hopefully start seeing them in a lot of kitchens.
Where do you see Iron Sand heading, like 5-year plan, if everything went, like, do you want it to stay boutique, or would you want it to grow, multiple shops, international?
I think, yeah, I mean, we watch some of the other, what I call like the mid-level the mid-level knife companies fairly closely, and it's a pretty big market. And like right now we're really comfortable where we're at, and we're doing good. 5-year plan, I'd like to have some more space in Malibu. Like I'd like to be in some of the nice boutiques here. Some of the home goods stores, or somebody that's gonna display them nice and sell them here. And then in the future, it might be nice to have some retail stores in some of these other beach cities, Santa Barbara. I was down in Todos Santos, Mexico, and I could see them down there too. So something like that. Have a couple, either retail areas or just part of a retail area would be cool. Be kind of branching out that way. And then we've got plans to go to Japan and try and sell some knives in Japan soon. So we'll see how that goes.
It's going to be hard for you to leave this place on a clear day. You can see the view. It's like, I don't know of too many other workshops that are this nice in terms of the setting.
I am convinced that I've got the most beautiful knife shop in the world. I think that, maybe there's some dude in some Swiss Alps somewhere that's got, a really, really awesome view, but it's never going to be as good as this one. Not for me. This is home.
And I believe you said this has been home for a long time. You've been a Malibu.
Yeah, so
resident.
I grew up on this street. My parents still live down the road. And I've been, other than when I was in school at UCLA, because I didn't want to leave, I've been in Malibu for 41 years. So, and on Zoomres for almost all that.
And how long ago did you say you started building out your workshop?
I didn't say, and I don't exactly remember. It's been 7 or 8 years. Around, right around when my first baby. So 7 years, not 8 years, here. But overall, about well, I can't say I've got 20 years of experience because that's not accurate. But it's been over 20 years. I forged my first knife when I was around 20. So
our daughters are actually in the same grade.
That's how you guys can.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to school with his sister. Or his wife.
Oh yeah, you were in school with Chase. That's right.
In class with Chase.
How funny. I think that's one of the coolest things about our job is meeting new people and kind of getting to see, in Malibu, I think in a lot of ways is such an interesting place because for whatever reason it feels like the best of the best, and whatever craft they have sometimes congregate in Malibu, and it's really
I think
fun to meet passionate people about whatever they're doing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, you have to be the best of the best to live in Malibu, right? Or for the most part, you've got to do well to be here, which is good. And I think the remarkable thing for me is that a good number of my friends that I went to school with still live here, and still manage to make it work to be residents here, which is pretty awesome.
We just wanted to say thank you. It was really great being here and seeing your place again, and just appreciate you and being on the podcast. So I'm Tony Mark, Russell Grather, Dane Skophammer, and thanks so much for being on the Malibu podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been awesome. All right.
Cool.
Golden surf rider sat by that wall, had my first beer here in Malibu. Malibu, Malibu.